I got home earlier than usual that day, hoping to surprise my wife, Linda. She works as a sales associate at a nearby electronics store, and we typically arrive home around the same time. With my work as a police officer, my shifts can be unpredictable, but today, I managed to clock out early. As I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I heard faint voices coming from the living room. Linda had no reason to expect me home this soon. Usually, she would just be unwinding with her favorite shows. I moved quietly, already brainstorming how I could surprise her. Maybe I could suggest a spontaneous dinner date. But as I approached the living room, the sight in front of me stopped me cold. There she was, on our couch, locked in an embrace with another man. A sharp pain hit me right in the chest as I recognized him. It was Dave, a coworker of hers, who had been to our house a few times for gatherings. I never once thought there was something going on between them. Linda's face went pale when she spotted me standing there, and she quickly pulled herself away from him. "Jake, what are you doing home so early?" she stammered, looking like a deer caught in headlights. I took a deep breath, doing my best to stay calm. "Nobody move," I said evenly, trying to keep my voice steady. I walked over to the dining table, pulled out a chair, and sat down across from them, fixing Linda with a steady gaze. "Linda," I asked, "how long has this been happening?" She blinked, obviously thrown by my calmness. "Jake, I never meant for this to happen. It just did." "How long?" I repeated, my voice as even as I could keep it. "A few months," she admitted in a quiet voice, barely above a whisper. "At first, it was just talking, but it grew into something more." "And you thought I would not pick up on any of this?" I asked, a bit of sarcasm slipping into my tone. Linda's face was blank, clearly confused. "You knew?" she asked, almost in disbelief. "Of course I noticed, Linda," I replied, shaking my head slowly. "You think I would not see the late nights, the distracted look in your eyes?" Dave shifted uncomfortably beside her, looking like he wanted to disappear. "Jake, maybe I should go," he mumbled. "Stay," I replied firmly, locking eyes with him. "You are a guest in my home, after all." Linda looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "Jake, I am so sorry. I love you. Can we try to work this out?" I sighed, feeling an overwhelming sense of fatigue. "I do not know," I replied after a pause. Turning to Dave, I said, "You can leave now. Thanks for staying." Dave did not waste a second. He was out of there in no time. Linda just stood there, looking shattered. I got up, feeling the walls of the room closing in on me. "I need some fresh air," I said, heading for the door. "We will talk later." As I stepped outside, I could hear her quiet sobs behind me. The evening was already settling in, and the cool air felt refreshing as I walked toward the local park. They sold hot dogs at a stand nearby, and I figured a little comfort food might help. I bought one and strolled around, biting into the hot dog as I tried to clear my head. Linda's voice echoed in my thoughts, asking if I could handle this. I had told her I was not sure, but deep down, I already knew I could not forgive her. I was a man of principle, and although I did not want to crush her hopes outright, the betrayal was too deep. As I savored the hot dog, I was surprised at how much it lifted my mood. That small joy made me realize how much I needed a break, a chance to reset. I had some vacation days saved up, and by the time I finished the hot dog, I knew what I had to do. The next day, I would head to the station and take those days off. I did not know where I would go or what I would do, but I needed time away from home and the mess left behind. After finishing the hot dog, I wandered around the park, letting the quiet of the surroundings help me gather my thoughts. I made my way to the city center, just walking aimlessly, hoping it would help me feel less lost. By the time I got back home, the sky was dark, and to my surprise, Linda was already asleep. I had half expected her to stay up, waiting for me, hoping we could talk things through, but the house was silent. Quietly, I went to the guest room to settle in for the night. When I got home, Linda was gone, probably still at work. Whether she was with Dave again or not, I honestly did not care. I grabbed the lawnmower, loaded it into the truck, and drove back to the house. The yard was in rough shape, overgrown with weeds and tall grass, so I spent the whole day cutting it down and clearing things up. My goal was to get at least the bedroom in livable condition, so I would have somewhere decent to sleep that night. To keep my energy up, I ate some quick-fix foods and store-bought snacks. By the time the sun began to set, I had made some decent progress. The house was on the outskirts of town, but with the thick woods surrounding it on three sides, it felt like I was deep in the middle of nowhere. The silence around me was almost eerie, but it was exactly what I needed. I cleaned out the bedroom, set up a makeshift bed, and sat down, feeling a small sense of accomplishment. The place was far from perfect, but it was a start. That evening, my phone rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. Linda's name flashed up. I sighed and answered. "Hello. Jake, where are you?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. "I am resting in a quiet place," I replied bluntly. "Can we at least talk about this?" she pushed, but I hung up before she could continue. She called a few more times after that, but I ignored each one. The next morning, I packed the car with some tools and supplies and drove into town to pick up additional materials. While I was browsing the aisles, I spotted Lisa, and she noticed me too, waving and heading over. "Hey, Jake, how are things going?" she asked with a warm smile. "I'm managing," I replied, returning her smile. "Just grabbing some more supplies for the house." "Great to see you," she said. "Listen, I really want to thank you again for helping me with my car. Can I buy you a coffee?" "My treat." I hesitated a moment, but then nodded. "Sure, that sounds good." We found a small cafe nearby and sat down at an outside table. Lisa ordered coffee and a couple of pastries for us. "So, how is the whole fixing up the old house project coming along?" she asked, taking a sip of her coffee. "It is a work in progress," I replied. "My grandfather's place is pretty run down, but I am making headway." She nodded. "That sounds like a huge job. I admire your dedication." "It keeps me busy for sure," I said. "And what about you? How is the car holding up?" "Good, thanks to you," she replied with a smile. "I am staying with some relatives in town for a bit. It has been nice to catch up with family." We ended up talking for a while, sharing bits and pieces of our lives. It surprised me how easy it was to open up to her about what I was going through. After a while, she leaned forward, smiling. "I would love to see this house of yours sometime." I chuckled. "It is not much to look at yet. It is still a bit of a wreck. But once it is in better shape, I would be happy to show you around." "Sounds like a plan," she said, grinning. "I am looking forward to it." Back at the house, I threw myself into the work with new energy. I spent the rest of the day clearing out more clutter, repairing the porch, and getting rid of the debris inside. By evening, I sat on the freshly fixed porch, looking out over the yard. It was quiet, just the sounds of crickets and leaves rustling. As I sat there, my phone rang again. "Linda, Jake, where are you? Why are you not coming home?" she asked, her tone frustrated. "I am just resting in a quiet place," I replied, keeping my tone even. "Are you just going to ignore this? Are we getting a divorce or not?" she demanded. I leaned back in my chair, looking up at the stars. "What is the rush, Linda? I am not stopping you from being with anyone, not even with Dave or whoever else." "How dare you say that?" she snapped, her voice shaking. "You make me sound like some kind of. I never said that," I replied calmly. There was a pause, then her voice softened, though it was still tense. "Jake, this is not fair. You cannot just disappear and ignore everything." "Fair?" I replied with a hint of amusement. "You brought another man into our home, Linda." "How dare you?" she shouted angrily. "I never meant for things to go this far." "Well, they did," I replied, still keeping my voice steady. "Stop mocking me," she cried, and then the line went dead as she hung up on me. I put the phone down, rubbing my temples. The next day, I packed the car and headed back into town for more supplies. While at the hardware store, I ran into Lisa again. She was browsing the same aisle, and I could not help but smile. "Lisa, are you following me or something?" I teased. She laughed, shaking her head. "No, just here to visit my cousin who works here. But good to see you." "Good to see you too," I replied. "How about another coffee?" she suggested with a grin. "Or are you going to accuse me of following you around just to offer coffee?" I chuckled. "I would not mind. Let us do it." We walked to the same cafe, found a table outside, and the atmosphere was much more relaxed this time. As we talked, I noticed her giving me subtle signs of interest, a lingering touch on my arm, a playful smile, and I found myself responding, leaning in closer, holding eye contact a bit longer. "You are really dedicated to this house project," she commented, taking a sip of coffee. "It is keeping me busy, and I need that right now," I admitted. Lisa nodded in understanding. "Having something to work on helps keep your mind clear." We spent a long time chatting, laughing about little things. It felt good to just relax and talk with someone outside of the mess back home. Eventually, I checked my watch and realized a lot of time had passed. "Wow, I have been here with you so long that I have not gotten anything done on the house," I said, half joking. She laughed. "Sorry for the distraction." "It is a good distraction," I assured her. "But seriously, if we are going to keep hanging out, why not come by and help me out at the house? It would be nice to have some company while I work." She looked at me, amused. "You want me to help you with the renovations? Why not? Could be fun, and I could use the extra hands." She thought about it, then nodded. "All right, you have got a deal. I am here to visit family and take a break from work, so why not?" "Great," I said, genuinely pleased. We finished our coffee and parted ways, both of us smiling. Back at the house, I got right back to work with new motivation. Little by little, the place was coming together. The next day dawned bright and early, and as I stepped outside to start my work, I noticed something unusual. A car was parked at the edge of my property. I had not seen it before, and it made me curious. I walked over, cautious, noticing it was an older model, dark blue, with tinted windows. As I approached, I saw the driver's side window was down, and inside, a man was slumped over the wheel. My instincts as a cop kicked in, and I quickened my pace, heart pounding. "Hey, are you all right?" I called out, but he did not respond. I hurried to the car, gently shaking his shoulder, and he stirred, looking up at me with bleary eyes. "Help me," he croaked, his voice weak. "Hang on," I said, grabbing my phone to call for an ambulance. As I dialed, I noticed a deep cut on his arm, and he was bleeding heavily. "Stay with me. Help is on the way," I reassured him, grabbing a rag from my car to press against the wound and slow the bleeding. Through gritted teeth, he managed to say, "There was an accident. Someone hit me and just drove off." I glanced around, scanning the area for any signs of another vehicle or skid marks along the road. "Can you tell me anything about the car that hit you?" I asked him. It was a black SUV, he mumbled, his voice growing weaker. "Didn't catch the plate." Just then, the paramedics arrived and took over, loading the man onto a stretcher and into the ambulance. One of them approached me, asking, "Do you know this guy?" I shook my head. "No, I just found him here. He told me it was a hit and run. Thanks for the help." "We'll handle it from here," the paramedic said before heading back to the ambulance. After they left, I decided to drive into town and report the incident to the local police. It felt odd, being on the other side of things, filing a report rather than being the one investigating. At the station, I spoke with Officer Davis, who listened carefully as I described everything that had happened. "We'll look into it," he assured me. "Thanks for bringing this to our attention, Jake. We'll keep you updated." Leaving the station brought back memories of my days on the force, making the whole mess with Linda and the house feel distant, almost trivial. On my way back, I stopped by a diner to grab a quick bite, sitting at the counter with a cup of coffee. As I sat there, I could not shake the feeling that there was more to this hit and run than met the eye. The guy's fear had seemed genuine, but something about it felt off. On a hunch, I took a detour on my way back to the house, driving along the road where I had found the car. About a mile up, I spotted skid marks on the road and bits of broken glass scattered near the ditch. I pulled over to take a closer look. The glass was fresh, catching the light, and among the shards were pieces of a broken tail light. While I was examining the scene, my phone rang. It was Officer Davis. "Jake, we ran the plates on that car you reported. Turns out it was stolen about a week ago," he said. "A stolen car?" I replied, my mind racing with questions. "We're investigating, but I thought you should know. Stay safe out there," he added. "Thanks, Davis. Keep me in the loop." I hung up, staring at the scene around me. A stolen vehicle, a hit and run, and a man left for dead on my property. Something just did not add up. I took a few photos of the area on my phone and headed back to the house. Reaching out to a few old contacts from my police days, I managed to connect with Detective Ramirez, an old friend who still worked in the city. After I explained the situation, he agreed to meet me for coffee later that morning. When I arrived, Ramirez greeted me with a firm handshake. "Good to see you, Jake. So, tell me about this hit and run." I recounted everything: the injured man, the stolen car, and the scene of the accident. "Something just does not sit right with me," I concluded. Ramirez nodded, his expression serious. "We've been getting similar reports lately. Cars being stolen, then used in what seem like random accidents. It is possible they are all connected. What do you think it could be?" I asked, leaning in. "A few things come to mind," he said. "Could be insurance fraud, gang activity, or something else entirely. We're still piecing it together, but I'll look into the details of that car and see if it matches any of our cases." "Thanks, Ramirez. I appreciate it," I said, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. After our meeting, I headed back to the house, my mind buzzing with thoughts. I spent the rest of the day focused on renovations, tackling some plumbing issues, and starting on the living room walls. The work was exhausting but kept my mind off things. By the time evening came, I had made solid progress. Taking a break on the porch, I relaxed in the cool night air when my phone buzzed with a message from Ramirez. "Got some info. The car you found was tied to a robbery a few days ago. Might be more to this than just a hit and run. Be careful," the message read. I stared at the screen, a chill running down my spine. "Looks like things are getting more complicated," I muttered to myself. The next morning, I decided to examine the area around where I found the man. I spent a few hours combing through the ditch and nearby woods, hoping to find some clues. I came across a few more shards of glass and what looked like an old wallet, but nothing definitive. As I was about to leave, something caught my eye. Carved into the bark of a tree nearby was a strange symbol, a mix between a star and a triangle. I took a photo of it, planning to show Ramirez later. "This just keeps getting weirder," I muttered, shaking my head as I headed back to the house. I threw myself back into the renovations, but my mind kept drifting to the hit and run. Who was that man, and why had he been left for dead in a stolen car? The next day, I made a few calls to some former colleagues, hoping to dig up more information. Whatever was going on with Linda and the house would have to wait. There was a mystery here, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. That evening, Ramirez called. "Jake, that symbol you found? It has been showing up at other crime scenes. This is definitely something bigger. What do you need from me?" I asked, ready to go deeper. "Just keep an eye out and stay safe. I'll update you as we learn more," he replied. After hanging up, I felt a strange mix of excitement and unease. This was turning into something much bigger than I had anticipated. Over the next few days, I threw myself into investigating the case, piecing things together bit by bit. One evening, Ramirez called again, his tone urgent. "Jake, we have made a breakthrough. That symbol is tied to a local gang known for staging accidents and robberies. We have been tracking them for a while. Do we know where they are based?" I asked. "We think we do. We are planning a raid on a warehouse at the edge of town tomorrow morning. Thought you might want to be there," he offered. "I'll be there," I replied, feeling a rush of anticipation. The next morning, I joined Ramirez and the team at the warehouse. From the outside, it looked abandoned, but we knew it was more than that. Moving in carefully, we secured the area, weapons ready. Inside, we found stolen vehicles and a stash of goods from various heists, clear signs we had uncovered their main hub. As we secured the scene, I spotted the man I had found in the car. He was sitting in a corner, handcuffed, guarded by two officers. I walked over to him. "Remember me?" I asked. He looked up, fear and recognition crossing his face. "Yeah, I remember. You saved my life. Why were you left for dead?" I asked, hoping to understand his role in all this. "I was trying to get out," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to leave the gang, but they do not exactly let you walk away. They set me up to make it look like an accident. Figured I would not make it." "Well, you are lucky you did," I replied. And now you are going to help us take them down. With his cooperation, we pieced together the rest of the gang's operations. The group was dismantled, ending their string of staged accidents and robberies. With the case closed, I finally turned my attention back to the house and the repairs I needed in my own life. The days that followed brought a new sense of focus. Restoring my grandfather's old home provided a welcome distraction. Lisa had agreed to help, and her company made the work lighter on my mind. One afternoon, she showed up with a toolbox in hand, ready for another day of renovations. We worked side by side, painting walls, fixing up the porch, and making plans for the improvements yet to come. Usually, she would leave early to head back to her family, but today, she seemed in no rush as the sun started to dip below the horizon. I was in the kitchen, busy installing new handles on the cabinets, while Lisa was out in the living room, putting the finishing touches on the wall paint. Time slipped by faster than I realized, and before I knew it, it was well past the time she usually left. I finished up my task and headed upstairs, thinking about calling it a day. Just as I stepped into the bedroom, Lisa followed me up. I turned, a little surprised. "Hey, you are still here? It's pretty late." She smiled, a bit shyly. I just felt really good spending time with you today. Hearing about your investigation stories made me realize how much I enjoy your company." There was a quiet moment as her words settled between us. Then, she took a step closer and, almost in a whisper, suggested, "Maybe we could spend the night together?" I hesitated, considering what that might mean. But the isolation of the place and the connection we had shared these past few days made the choice easier. "Yeah," I agreed. "Let's do that." With no one around to interrupt, we settled into the bed. What had felt uncomfortable when I slept here alone now felt warm and welcoming with her beside me. Afterward, we lay in each other's arms, wrapped in the peacefulness of the night. Lisa broke the silence first. I have a boyfriend," she admitted softly. "He cheated on me, and I guess I just wanted to feel something different." A surge of surprise, and maybe a little indignation, ran through me. "So, this was just for revenge?" She shook her head, her eyes sincere. "No, Jake, it is not just that. I like you. You make me feel safe and valued, things I have not felt in a long time." I sighed, feeling a mix of emotions. My wife cheated on me too. That is why I am here, trying to put my life back together. Lisa reached out, gently touching my face. "I understand. Anyway, I am glad we are here now." We talked for a while, sharing our stories, finding comfort in our similar experiences of betrayal. Despite the circumstances, there was something genuine between us, something that felt right. Early the next morning, Lisa got up quietly to leave, not wanting to disturb me. But I stirred and watched her get ready. "Will I see you again?" I asked. She smiled, leaning down to kiss me softly. "Of course. I'll be back to help with the house and to see you." With Lisa's help, the renovations picked up speed. Her presence gave me a renewed sense of purpose, and together, we tackled tasks that would have taken me twice as long alone. The house was starting to transform from an old relic into a warm, inviting home. We painted walls, fixed up the plumbing, replaced windows, and even restored the old wooden floors. Our days were filled with hard work and laughter, while the nights were spent wrapped up in each other, sharing stories and dreams. It felt comfortable, but I knew it was temporary. One evening, as we lay in bed, Lisa turned to me, a serious expression on her face. "I have to head back home in a week," she said quietly. "I have work and responsibilities waiting for me." I nodded, feeling a pang of sadness. "I understand. I have 6 more days of vacation left, so let's make the most of it." Over the next few days, we put the final touches on the house. We installed new light fixtures, hung up curtains, and added small personal details that made the place feel like a real home. The transformation was incredible, and I felt a deep sense of satisfaction seeing it all come together. One of those days, we decided to take a break from working on the house and packed a picnic to drive out to a nearby lake. It was a beautiful, secluded spot, perfect for relaxing and enjoying each other's company. We spent the day swimming, lounging in the sun, and talking about our future plans. As we sat by the water, Lisa looked at me thoughtfully. "So, what are you going to do after I leave, Jake?" I sighed, gazing out at the lake's shimmering surface. I am not entirely sure. This house was supposed to be my escape, my focus, but now that it's nearly done, I need to figure out what's next. She nodded, understanding. It is important to have a plan, something to look forward to. Yeah, I replied. I think I will stay here a while, settle into the new place. Maybe invite a few old friends over and, well, I'll need to sort things out with Linda. We have to have a conversation about where we're headed. Lisa reached over, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. You will figure it out. You are stronger than you realize. We spent the rest of the day enjoying the quiet beauty of the lake, savoring the time together. As the sun set, we packed up and headed back to the house, both of us aware that our time was running short. In those final days, we poured ourselves into completing the house, cooking meals together, watching old movies, and talking late into the night. It was bittersweet, knowing this chapter was ending. On the last day of my vacation, Lisa and I sat on the porch, looking out over the yard. The house was finally finished, and it looked beautiful. You did an amazing job, Lisa said, smiling at me. We did, I corrected her, wrapping an arm around her. I could not have done it without you. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I am going to miss this place and you. I'll miss you too, I said, pulling her closer. But we will keep in touch. Who knows? Maybe we will see each other again soon. That night, we made love with a sense of urgency and tenderness, knowing it would be our last time together for a while. As we lay together afterward, Lisa said softly, I really needed this, Jake. Not just the project, but you. You helped me heal. You helped me too, I replied, holding her close. Early the next morning, Lisa packed her things, and we said our goodbyes. She kissed me softly and whispered, Take care of yourself, Jake. You too, Lisa, I replied, watching her drive away. The last item on my to-do list for the house was installing security cameras and setting up a surveillance system. Given everything that had happened, I wanted to make sure the place was protected, especially since I would be away for long stretches. I spent the morning setting up the cameras around the property, covering the entrances and key areas. Once everything was in place, I signed a contract with a trusted security company who assured me they would respond quickly to any threat. With the security measures in place, I felt a sense of closure. The house was complete, safe, and ready. It was time to return home and face whatever awaited me there. The drive back was filled with a mix of anticipation and dread. I had been gone for weeks, and I was not sure what I would find. Pulling into the driveway, I saw Linda's car parked outside. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation we had to have. As I walked into the house, the silence was almost unsettling. I called out, Linda, I'm home. There was no immediate response, and I walked through the house, my footsteps echoing off the walls. In the living room, I finally found her sitting on the couch, looking tense. Next to her was a man in a suit, holding a briefcase. Linda's eyes were red, and it was clear she had been crying. Jake, we need to talk, she said, her voice trembling. I looked at the man beside her, feeling a knot form in my stomach. What's going on? The man stood and extended his hand. Mr. Johnson, my name is Stephen Turner. I am a lawyer representing your wife. I shook his hand, feeling a wave of confusion and worry. All right, so what is this about? Linda took a shaky breath, clutching a folder in her hands. Jake, I did not know how to tell you this, but I am pregnant. I stood there, stunned. Pregnant? I repeated, my mind racing. How far along? About 2 months, she replied quietly. I did the math in my head, realizing this must have happened around the time things had started unraveling between us. Without thinking, I asked, Is it mine? Linda's face fell, and she looked down at her hands. I don't know, Linda confessed, her voice wavering. It could be yours, or it might be Eddie's. The room felt like it was spinning, and I took a step back, trying to absorb what she just said. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. I was afraid, she said, tears running down her cheeks. I had no idea how to handle it, and then everything with Eddie happened. I just didn't know what to do. Her lawyer, Michael Grant, cleared his throat, cutting through the silence. Mr. Johnson, Linda has decided to keep the child. So we need to discuss the next steps, including a paternity test and how to proceed. I raked a hand through my hair, feeling entirely overwhelmed. All right, I managed at last. We'll figure this out. We moved over to the dining table, where Michael began outlining the legal aspects we needed to address, from establishing paternity to discussing potential custody and support. It was a lot to take in, but I focused, knowing this was now my reality. Once Michael left, Linda and I were left in the quiet of the house. We sat there, the weight of everything pressing down on us, until she finally broke the silence. Jake, I know I've messed up badly, and I understand if you can't forgive me, but I want to do what's best for this child. Of course you do, I replied, bitterness creeping into my tone. Part of me wanted to throw out a sarcastic comment like the ones I'd made on the phone, but I held back. A week later, we got the results from the paternity test. I had braced myself for anything, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to hear. Linda and I sat in the doctor's office, waiting for the answer. Eddie had provided a sample too, and now we were moments away from the truth. The doctor entered, holding a file in his hand. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, he said, his tone serious. I have the results. Jake, you are not the father of this child, and neither is Eddie. The words hit like a sledgehammer. I turned to look at Linda, who appeared equally shocked. Then who is it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Linda's face went pale. I don't know, she stammered. There was no one else, I swear, Jake. I stood up abruptly, trying to keep a lid on the storm of emotions inside. Got it, Linda. Damn you. We left the office in silence, the weight of that revelation pressing down on us as we drove home. Linda tried to break the tension. You've grown quite the beard, she said, almost admiring. You haven't shaved this whole time on leave. I shot her a glance, barely containing my contempt. And you turned out to be even more of a fraud than I ever thought. I snapped, unable to hold back. If I told the guys at the station who I ended up with, they'd laugh me out of there. Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. She didn't say another word the rest of the drive. We both knew there was nothing left to say. When we finally got home, the silence was unbearable. We stood there in the living room, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The house felt colder, stripped of the warmth and hope we once shared. So, what do we do now? Linda asked quietly, her voice trembling. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. All right, you want to keep the baby, right? Linda nodded, wiping her tears. Yes, Jake. I want to keep the baby, no matter what. I looked at her, feeling a complicated mix of anger, betrayal, and a strange sense of responsibility. Fine, but we're going to need some boundaries. I need time to process all this. For the next few days, we lived in tense silence, barely speaking and avoiding each other as much as possible. I threw myself into work, using it to block out the chaos at home. One day, Linda entered the room, her eyes red from crying. Jake, can we talk? She asked softly. I looked up, nodding slowly. Yeah, I guess we need to. She sat down across from me, hands trembling. I'm sorry for everything. I know I've hurt you deeply, but I want to make things right. I want to be a good mother and to fix what's left of our relationship. I sighed, running a hand through my beard. Say no more. I know, I replied. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Jake. I still love you, despite everything. Hearing those words felt like a blow to my pride. Hearing I love you from someone like you, it feels like a humiliation to my manhood. Months went by, and despite our attempts, Linda and I couldn't find common ground about the child. We tried everything, mediation, long talks, even family counseling, but we just couldn't agree. To cope, I buried myself in work, filling my days with tasks and responsibilities that let me escape the turmoil at home. But my real comfort came from my conversations with Lisa. She was my anchor, a breath of fresh air amid all the tension. Each day, I found a moment to call her. We'd talk about anything and everything. Her job, my cases, the progress on the house, and little things that made life manageable. Her voice was a constant reminder that there was still kindness and understanding in the world. One evening, as I was on the phone with Lisa, Linda walked into the room. I glanced at her briefly, then continued my conversation, laughing at something Lisa had said. Linda stood there silently, her expression unreadable. She'd seen how much these calls lifted my spirits, how they brought a rare smile to my face. When I hung up, Linda was still standing there, her eyes filled with a sadness that cut deep. "You really care about her, don't you?" she asked quietly. "She's been a good friend," I replied, not wanting to add to the pain of the situation. Linda nodded, looking away. "I see how you talk to her, how you treat her. What do you think about this story? Write in comments. If you don't follow our channel Cheating Room, you will probably never hear from us again. If you are subscribed, congratulations, you will not miss any exciting story. Thank you for listening to this shocking story with us. See you again.
Bye bye.